Hello all, this is your daily lesson. This is actually going to be posted separately from our daily news video, so don't forget to go check that out. These are two separate videos, okay? So remember that. Now, today we are going to start talking about finding credible news sources. This is going to be our topic for the week, and we're going to talk about this before I start having you guys go out and find news sources of your own to do journalistic reports on, okay? So, finding credible news is very important, especially in today's age where a lot of us get our news online or from social media, okay? So there are a lot of news sites running around and not all of them are equal, okay? So some of these are very iffy, and some of them are very credible, and we're going to learn what that means and how we can tell the difference, okay? So today's question is, how do we find credible information on the internet? So as we go through this slideshow, we're going to work on answering that question so that you become an informed viewer and an informed citizen, and you know how to tackle the news and find the best real news sources for you guys, okay? Learning objectives. So first one, we're going to talk about some reasons that people put false or misleading information on the internet and how you can find those things. And then two, we are going to learn some criteria for differentiating fake news from credible news. Okay, so what that means is we're going to learn some check boxes, or we're going to learn some facts that you can look at, and we're going to learn some ways that you can say, okay, this news source, it doesn't meet these three criteria, so I think that it's probably going to be fake, okay? Or if it does meet, like you look through your list and it checks off all the boxes, then hey, it's a real news source. All right, so we're going to learn the difference between those two and some of the ways that you can decide that. And then we are going to practice to find something and see whether it's fake or not. We are actually going to have you guys practice that yourselves tomorrow. So we're only going to go through the first two today, okay? And then we'll do the third one tomorrow together as the first part of y'all's homework for tomorrow, okay? So we're going to go through the first one tomorrow, or today. Now, I'm going to read a little snippet of this internet article about corn, okay? And I want you to listen carefully and decide, does that sound real or does that not, okay? So, corn, and they have a quote, that's a Buccaneer, Oscar Wilde on food price inflation. So that was a joke, a buck and ear, and Buccaneer is also called pirates. So that's a little joke. So corn is a dangerous fruit that grows on a corn tree. It is arguably the deadliest fruit on earth, but many are unaware and gulp it down each year. The fruit itself comprises the following parts. A hard core made of dense organic matter. It is inedible. I have tried. However, dogs regard it as equivalent to meat. Okay. Now, immediately when I read that, there were some things that stuck out to me as red flags. First of all, corn is a dangerous fruit. Now we know corn isn't a fruit. Corn is a vegetable. So the first red flag is they got something wrong. All right, that grows on a corn tree. No, it doesn't. Corn grows on a plant. It grows on stalks. We've all seen cornfields. We know what they look like. All right, it is arguably the deadliest fruit, once again, not a fruit, on earth, but many are unaware and gulp it down each year. So, you guys probably eat a lot of corn every year. Has it ever tried to kill you? Has it ever been poisonous? Has it ever been crazy dangerous? That's a third red flag, okay? So, whenever we see that they get facts wrong, and then they say things like the most or the least, or I believe or I argue, that's also a red flag because that means it's probably somebody's opinion, okay? So, that was a little exercise to show you, articles like this are easy because we know a lot about, we know what corn is and we know what corn's like. But what if you were reading an article about something you didn't know about? Like, what if you were reading an article about governors or taxes or medical supplies and they made all of these mistakes? You wouldn't know and you wouldn't be able to pick those out, so you might believe that. Okay, so this just goes to show how easy it is to spread false information on the internet. All right, this is a vocabulary word. We are going to have 4 vocabulary words today, and we're going to use them a lot when I talk about this week's assignments, so it's very important that you learn them now. All right, and I will also post this PowerPoint onto Dojo so you can go back and look at it whenever you need, okay? So, credible. It means able to be believed or trustworthy. Okay, so that's why we use it when we talk about news that is trustworthy. We call it credible news. Okay, it's because you can believe it, it's true, it's got the facts right, it's from somebody that is either an official or good in their field or knows what they're talking about. Okay, credible, able to be believed or trustworthy. Why might information you find on the internet not be true? So this goes back to our first learning objective. Some of the reasons people post stuff that's not true on the internet. Okay, we have 3. They could be posting it as an editorial. So that is an article or blog that is meant to persuade the reader of the author's opinion and which may include bias or leave out important facts. Okay, so editorials are like opinion pieces. Okay, so they're opinion pieces that are trying to convince you that you should also support whatever the author supports. Okay? Now, if you're trying to get somebody to support something, if you're trying to convince them of what you think, oftentimes you're not going to be giving them as much information about all of the other options because you want them to believe what you're saying. Okay? So that's why editorials and opinion pieces probably not the best places to go if you want facts. Okay? You want to stick to news or feature articles for facts. Okay? Opinion articles are good and they give us a lot of information, but if we're talking about straight facts, we want to stick with news and feature articles, okay? Satire. Satire is a special type of joke where somebody writes something or, sings or performs something that's meant to make fun of something else, okay? So websites or articles that are meant to be funny by making fun of a subject and which often include statements that are untrue. Okay, so satire is going to be really big and unbelievable and over the top. Okay, so these are going to be websites like The Onion or Reductress, okay? Or if you guys have ever seen the Scary Movie franchise, that's satire, when they take real movies and then they film them and they make fun of them in a way that's really over the top and goofy and crazy, okay? So satire is like that. But if you don't know a lot about the subject, you might not be able to pick up on how they're making all of those jokes. So you might read it and think that that's true. Okay, so it's very important that we check that the website or the article wasn't written to make a joke. Okay, and then hoaxes is our third one. Hoaxes are articles that are meant to fool the reader into believing something that isn't true by trying to be as realistic as possible. Okay, so this is somebody trying to trick people. Okay, so hoaxes are trying to trick people into believing things that aren't true. Now we need to make sure that we don't fall for them, but the problem with hoaxes is, see this, by trying to be as realistic as possible. If somebody's really good at lying or really good at making stuff up, then that article, whatever it is, might sound true, okay? Which is why you need to do your research and check on other websites to make sure, or other news outlets, and make sure that they are also reporting the same thing, okay? Because we don't want to get tricked. So evaluate is another vocabulary word, and to evaluate means to carefully examine, so to carefully look at something to figure out its value. So to figure out if it's worth reading, or to figure out if it's true, or to figure out if it's credible, okay? So we're carefully looking at news articles to figure out if we think they're true or not, okay? Bias. Now, I've already used this word a couple of times, so we're going to talk about what it means now. So bias means having preference for one thing over another in a way that's unfair. So bias basically is just showing favoritism, okay? So sometimes, you guys, we can all get mad where we think somebody maybe likes somebody more than they like us, and they're always nice to them and helping them out, whereas they're always, either trying to get us in trouble, or they don't believe us, or they don't like us as much, okay? So what you're mad about is people showing favoritism. Bias is the same thing. If somebody believes something and doesn't believe something else, then they might try to convince you that whatever they're saying is true without actually giving the other side a fair shot. Okay? Now, corroboration. Corroboration is just other sources that confirm or support a news story, article, or piece of information. So once again, if you hear something and it sounds crazy and you can't find anybody else that's reporting on it, that's a good idea that that might not be true. Okay, good sources for corroboration are websites like Scientific American, or academic sites like colleges, or things like Scholastic or National Geographic. All of those places are good whenever we're looking at like scientific information. So if somebody says, oh, we just discovered a 10th planet, okay, a 9th and 10th planet, and you go to NASA's website and NASA doesn't say anything about planets 9 and 10, guess what? It's probably a good idea to think, hey, that's probably fake news. There probably are no crazy extra special new planets, okay? So this is actually the activity that we were going to start off tomorrow with. So this is going to be us going through the first of 3 articles. We're going to read them closely. We're going to analyze the source and see if we think the source, which means where the article came from, is reliable or not. And then we're going to look for corroboration on other sites to make sure that whatever information is presented in the article is actually true. Okay? Now, this is our last little bit. How credible is it? This is the criteria that I was talking about. So these are the criteria that if it meets these, it's probably fake news. And if it meets these, then it could be fake, but it could be true, and it could be, a mix of half and half. Some true things, some fake things. And if we go over to credible and it meets all of these, then that's a good sign that that is a good, reliable news source, and then you should get your information from there, okay? So we're going to go through these. So for fake news, if the information is surprising, even unbelievable. So have you ever read something or heard something somebody says and you're like, wow, that's insane, that's crazy, I can't believe it, okay? If you ever feel like it's unbelievable, that's a good idea, that's probably for a reason, okay? That means it's probably not true, okay? Now, the website is biased or is not part of a credible news, academic, or governmental organization. So, let's see this. If I sent you an article that said, aliens spotted on the moon, breaking news information, okay? And you were like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then you look in the website I got it from is, The Truth is Out There, Aliens Among Us, okay? We already know that that's an alien website made by people who believe in aliens. So if I send you a news article written by them, do you think it's going to be fair to the idea that maybe aliens don't exist? Or do you think it's going to be all about how everybody knows, everybody's hiding the truth about aliens? Okay? So if somebody says that they're biased, listen to them, because they probably are. Same thing about author's bio or previous articles show a bias on the issue. So if I sent you an article that said why the Houston Texans are the worst team in NFL history. And you looked at the author's bio, and the author's bio said, maybe James Carl, ex Dallas Cowboys news reporter and world's biggest Dallas Cowboys fan. Okay? If the guy says that he's biased and he thinks that the Cowboys are the greatest team ever, then everything he writes about other sports teams is probably not going to be very reliable, right? Because he's biased. He favors one over the other, so we don't want to listen to what he has to say about all the others. Okay? And key points cannot be corroborated by other credible sites. Okay? So if we take, 2 or 3 things that the article claims and we look at them up on other really good credible sites that we already trust and nothing shows up, once again, probably not a good, reliable news source. Okay? So if it meets those criteria, any of those criteria, then that probably means that it's fake news. All right, so questionable news. The information is surprising, but it's not entirely unbelievable. So you hear it and you're like, that's crazy, but you're like, I don't really know enough about it to say whether that's true or not. Or if you really think about it, you're like, I could see how that's true. It's not necessarily 100% makes sense, but I could see how that could happen. Okay? The website is not part of a credible news, academic, or governmental organization. Okay? So we know that there are credible news sites, and we're going to talk about some of those credible news sites later, okay? Not today because it's getting really long. But we know, so of academic sites, so things like colleges, or if Her ISD posts something, okay? Or if I send you to some sites that have been picked by me, those are probably good, okay? Or governmental organizations. Like I said, if NASA puts out something that says, hey, we discovered a, 9th planet, probably more believable than if some website called stars for sale dot budget, safaris dot com slash, infographic. That's probably not nearly as believable as something official, okay? Or the author's bio or previous articles may show bias, or the article is an editorial or opinion piece. Okay, so if somebody writes an opinion article or an editorial article trying to convince you of something, then you can take that information, okay, and you can take that point of view and you can think about it, and you might even believe it, but just know that that's not news, okay? So you still need to get facts from another source, okay? And then most key points can be corroborated, but there are a couple of things that they say that just nobody else is saying. So maybe take that as like, okay, some of this is true, but some of this isn't. So I'm going to go to a more reliable source to get the news about whatever the topic is, okay? And then credible news. So news that's good, that we're ready to go, ready to watch, okay? Information may or may not be surprising, but it also makes sense, okay? So sometimes we do get really incredible news stories that come out. So maybe scientists discovered something new, or wildlife photographers filmed like a really amazing, site. So that's something that's amazing and it's surprising. But it also makes sense, okay? If you read the article and you look at the facts and you look at the work, then it makes sense. Okay? There's no part of it where you read it and you're like, I'm not sure about that. Okay? The website is part of a credible news, academic, or governmental organization. Okay? So, if something's coming from CNN or BBC or the Associated Press, okay? And then maybe, it's coming from A&M academic university, or it comes from the desk of the governor, okay? All of those things are reliable sources, okay? Those are official sources of things that you can look at and be like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is good. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't, still double check some big facts, but it, generally means that those are pretty reliable things that you can read and trust, okay? The author, has no clear bias on the issue, and the article is not an opinion piece. Okay, so they're not trying to convince you, they're just trying to inform. Okay, and when you look up the author, you don't really have any bias. Okay, so say we go back to that article about say the article, Houston Texans are the worst team in NFL right now, and it's not written by, somebody who's a super fan of somebody else. Maybe it's just written by a sports commentator, okay? That might be not as much biased as the one that's written by the Dallas Cowboys super fan, okay? And all of the key points can be corroborated on other credible sites. So all of the information in the article, if you searched it somewhere else, it would show up as completely true, all right? So those are our 3 checklists that we can look at to see whether news sources are fake news or if they're credible news. Okay? Now, don't forget, need to watch the daily news video. It's going to be short since a lot of the stuff was added to this video for the lesson. Okay? So I'm going to talk today about another press conference, daily news for the week. Since I was off on Friday, I'm going to catch you guys up on all sorts of stuff. Famous birthdays that are today, a lot of good space news. There's a lot of great things happening with space right now. And anything else you guys need to know. All right. Bye-bye, and I will talk to you tomorrow.